Beethoven's unconquerable spirit, episodes of defiance, rage, and unshakable self-worth. From Romain Rolland's book on Beethoven. Introduction: The character behind the genius. This report does not aim to be a comprehensive biographical depiction. Rather, the focus is specifically on examining Ludwig van Beethoven's unyielding, often volatile character, which was marked by a deep, unshakable pride. The thesis put forth is that these traits should not be seen as mere personal weaknesses, but were inseparably linked to his artistic power and his revolutionary significance for music history. His often brusque and challenging behavior stemmed from a radically new self-conception of the artist as an autonomous, spiritual power that elevated itself above the age-old social hierarchies. Behind the often rough exterior, however, lay a firm moral compass, which Beethoven himself unequivocally formulated on July 17, 1812. "I recognize no other mark of superiority in man than goodness." This commitment to goodness as the highest human value forms the crucial context for understanding his often perceived as difficult character. The first signs of this exceptional, unconventional spirit showed themselves early in his life, shortly after his arrival in the musical center of Europe. 1. Early signs of an unconventional spirit in Vienna. When Beethoven arrived in Vienna in 1792, he entered a world shaped by courtly conventions and aristocratic etiquette. His early interactions in this society established a fundamental pattern of his behavior toward social norms and authorities. They revealed a man who refused to play the expected role of the subservient artist and instead, from the very beginning, made an unconditional claim to personal and artistic autonomy. The first impressions he left on Vienna's musical elite were characterized by a mixture of astonishment and horror. After one of his improvisations, the established musicians Hummel, Vogler, and Gelling came to the judgment that he must have something of the devil in him. This remark referred not only to his technical brilliance, but also to the untamed, almost demonic force that emanated from his personality. A striking example of his aversion to all things subservient and his uncompromising stubbornness is found in an episode from his daily life. He gave up his apartment because his landlord showed him exaggerated politeness and tipped his hat every time they met on the stairs. Beethoven found this behavior humiliating and intolerable. These episodes, both the artistic and the private, are more than just anecdotes. They establish the basic pattern of Beethoven's lifelong refusal to bow to any form of subservience, be it toward artistic conventions or social etiquette. Observers like Madame von Bernhard and the aforementioned Gelling described him during this time as extremely proud, with rough and awkward manners. This image of a man who consciously positioned himself outside social norms completes the portrait of his early appearance in Vienna. This initial attitude would soon lead to direct and memorable confrontations with the highest social strata. 2. Confrontation with nobility and authority, the spirit of the Republic. Beethoven's interactions with the aristocracy were more than mere outbursts of a difficult temperament. They were conscious acts of self-assertion that revealed his deep Republican convictions and his radically new self-conception as an artist. He saw himself not as a servant of his patrons, but as their spiritual equal, whose genius elevated him above the shackles of birth and status. A notorious incident in the courtyard of his benevolent patron Prince Lobkowitz impressively illustrates this attitude. In a fit of rage, Beethoven shouted across the courtyard, loud enough for all the servants and maids to hear, the words, "Lobkowitz ass, Lobkowitz ass." This was an act of open disregard for hierarchical subservience, which did not stop even before one of his most important supporters. The most significant episode, which represents his character in its purest form, occurred in 1812 in the Bohemian spa town of Teplitz during a walk with Goethe. Beethoven himself recounted the encounter with the imperial family in a letter, and his description is an invaluable testament to his unshakable self-worth, in contrast to Goethe's courtly convention. Kings and princes can certainly make professors and privy councillors and hang titles and ribbons around people, but they cannot make great men, spirits that tower above the world's rabble. And when two like me and Goethe come together, these great gentlemen must notice the difference between the likes of us and them. Yesterday, as we were walking home, the entire imperial family met us. We saw them coming from afar, and Goethe detached himself from my side to stand aside. I could say whatever I wanted to him. I couldn't get him to take another step. I pressed my hat onto my head, buttoned up my greatcoat, and walked with my arms folded right through the densest crowd. Princes and hangers-on made a lane. Archduke Rudolph took off his hat. The Empress greeted me first. The Excellencies know me. To my heartfelt delight, I saw the procession pass by Goethe. He stood deeply bowed on the side with his hat removed. I took him to task quite strictly for it and showed him no mercy at all. This incident is the ultimate depiction of his character, his unconditional insistence on equality based on genius rather than birth, stands in stark contrast to Goethe's conformist behavior. For Beethoven, this was not a matter of manners, but an act of principled equality. However, his anger and idealism did not only target social hierarchies, but also the greatest political figures of his time. 3. The Idealist's Rage. The Dethronement of Napoleon. Beethoven's reaction to Napoleon Bonaparte is a key event that reveals his unconditional idealism and his fierce, uncompromising reaction to the perceived betrayal of these ideals. It shows a man whose artistic vision was inseparably linked to his political and moral convictions. Initially, Beethoven harbored a deep admiration for Napoleon, whom he saw as the embodiment of the ideals of the French Revolution, as the heroic consul of a new republic based on liberty and equality. In this admiration, he composed the Sinfonia Eroica, which originally bore the title Bonaparte and was dedicated to him. His reaction to the news that Napoleon had crowned himself emperor in 1804 was marked by eruptive rage. He saw this as the ultimate betrayal of republican principles. Furious, he exclaimed, "He is only an ordinary man." In his anger, he performed a symbolic act of greatest significance. He seized the title page of the score, tore off the dedication to Bonaparte, and changed the title to Sinfonia Eroica, composta per festeggiare il souvenire di un grand uomo, heroic symphony, composed to celebrate the memory of a great man. This symbolic act of dethronement was thus not only a political gesture, but the purest manifestation of a radical self-conception that acknowledged no authority above its own spiritual and moral judgment. 4. The realm of the spirit, Beethoven's radical self-conception. The philosophical basis for Beethoven's defiant and often confrontational behavior lay in his deep-seated belief in the absolute superiority of the spirit and art over all worldly power and social convention. His actions did not stem from mere capriciousness, but from a coherent worldview in which the creative artist assumed a quasi-monarchical position. His realm was not of this world, but one of ideas and tones. This conviction was clearly perceived by his contemporaries. The writer Bettina Brentano summarized this impression in succinct words when she wrote that no king or emperor was so conscious of his power as Beethoven. He himself defined the sphere of his true existence with poetic clarity in a letter to Franz von Brunswick. "My realm is in the air." This radical self-conception also manifested itself in a remarkable, almost defiant indifference to the greatest political powers of his time. After the Battle of Jena, one of the highlights of Napoleon's military glory, Beethoven made one of his boldest statements, which underscored his claim to superiority in his own realm. "What a pity that I don't understand as much about warfare as I do about music. I would show him that I am his master." These quotes and observations paint the picture of a man for whom the realm of the spirit was the highest of all realities, a realm in which he was the undisputed sovereign. 5. Conclusion, a character forged in fire and principles. The episodes analyzed in this report show that Ludwig van Beethoven's legendary stubbornness, his volatile anger, and his brusque behavior were not mere whims of an eccentric genius. They were rather the consistent expression of a revolutionary self-conception that fundamentally questioned the traditional role of the artist in society. Beethoven was one of the first artists to place the complete autonomy of the spirit above the conventions of the aristocracy and the hierarchies of power. He demanded equality not as grace but as the innate right of genius, and was willing to accept any confrontation for this conviction. His anger at Napoleon was the rage of a betrayed idealist. His contempt for courtly subservience was the stance of a convinced republican, and his unshakable pride was the consciousness of a sovereign in the realm of the air. Beethoven's unconquerable character was thus the forge in which his equally unconquerable revolutionary music was shaped. A deeper understanding of his personality is therefore essential to grasp the full power and epoch-making significance of his artistic creation.